Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai. Ganga Mayi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Mayapur Dham. Today we continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on the second canto, fourth chapter, and today's verse will be number 9. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay, it seems we have a serious delay here, so I'm sorry about that, but hopefully the internet is at least stable enough where nothing cuts out, hopefully. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam 249. Yata gunams tu prakriter yugapat kramaso vipa bibharti bhurishashtveka korvan karmani janmabhi. Actually, I thought we were doing 10. Are we doing 9 and 10 today?
Sorry, Prabhu. Let me.
Means I can cover 9 if need be.
No. He did 8 and 9 yesterday.
Oh, okay. So today's verse is 10 then. Okay. Vichiksitam eta Vichikitsitam etan me ravitu bhagavan yata shabde brahmani nishnata parasminscha bhavan kalu. Vichikitsitam etan me ravitu bhagavan yata shabde brahmani nishnata parasmimscha bhavan kalu. Vichikitsitam etan me bravitu bhagavan yata shabde brahmani nishnata parasmimscha bhavan kalu. Please.
Vichikshitistam etan me bravitu bhagavan yatha shabde brahmani nishnatha parasmimscha bhavan kalu.
Hare Krishna. Vichikitam hitam me bhavatu bhagavan yatha shabde brahmani nishnataha parasmimscha bhavan kalu. Kahu.
Hare Krishna.
Hitam me
भवतो भगवान् यथा शबदे शबद्धे ब्रह्मणि निष्णात परस्मिंश्च भवन कलौ.
Hare Krishna. Vichikitसितं एतान् मे ब्रवीतु भगवान् यथा शब्दे ब्रह्मणि निष्णातः परस्मिन् च भवान् खलु. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
विचिक्षितम् एतान् मे ब्रवीतु भगवान् यथा शब्दे ब्रह्मणि निष्णातः परस्मिंश्च भवान् खलु.
Anyone else? Okay. Vichikitsitam, doubtful inquiry. Etat, this, me, of me. Bravitu, just clear up. Bhagavan, powerful like the Lord. Yata, as much as. Shabde, sound transcendental. Brahmani, Vedic literature. Nishnataha, fully realized. Parasmin, in transcendence. Cha, also. Bhavan, your good self. Kalu, as a matter of fact. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Kindly clear up all these doubtful inquiries, because you are not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and self-realizing transcendence, but are also a great devotee of the Lord, and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Govinda, the personality of Godhead, although one without a second, is infallibly expanded by innumerable forms, non-different from one another. And although he is the original person, he is still ever young with permanent youthful energy. He is very
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You seem to be breaking up. Maybe you can turn off the video to see if that will help. It says bandwidth is low. While we're waiting for him, let me just continue reading so that he'll have as much time as possible. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Govinda, the personality of Godhead, although one without a second, is infallibly expanded by innumerable forms, non-different from one another. And although he is the original person, he is still ever young with permanent youthful energy. He is very difficult to know simply by learning the transcendental science of the Vedas, but he is very easily realized by his pure devotees. The expansions of different forms of the Lord, as from Krishna to Baladeva to Shankarsana, from Shankarsana to Vasudeva, from Vasudeva to Aniruddha, from Aniruddha to Pradyumna, and then again to the second Sankarsana, and from him to the Narayana Purusha avatars and innumerable other forms, which are compared to the constant flowing of the uncountable waves of a river are all one and the same. They are like lamps of equal power which kindle from one lamp to another. That is the transcendental potency of the Lord. The Vedas say that he is so complete that even though the whole complete identity emanates from him, he still remains the same complete whole. Purnasya purnam adaya purnam eva vasishyate. As such, there is no validity in a material conception of the Lord produced by the mental speculator. Thus, he remains always a mystery for the mundane scholar, even if he is vastly learned in the Vedic literatures. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhaktav. Therefore, the Lord is beyond the limit of conception for mundane learned scholars, philosophers, or scientists. He is easily understandable for the pure devotee because the Lord declares in the Bhagavad Gita 18:54 that after surpassing the stage of knowledge, when one is able to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, then only can one know the true nature of the Lord. One cannot have any clear conception of the Lord or his holy name, form, attributes, pastimes, etc., unless one is engaged in his transcendental loving service. The statement of the Bhagavad Gita that one must first of all surrender unto the Lord, being freed from all other engagements, means that one must become a pure, unconditional devotee of the Lord. Only then can one know him by the strength of devotional service. Maharaj Parikshit admitted in the previous verse that the Lord is inconceivable even for the greatest learned scholars. Why then should he again request Sukadeva Goswami to clarify his insufficient knowledge about the Lord? The reason is clear. Not only was Sukadeva Goswami vastly learned in the Vedic literatures, but he was also a great self-realized soul and a powerful devotee of the Lord. A powerful devotee of the Lord is, by the grace of the Lord, more than the Lord himself. The personality of Godhead, Sri Ramachandra, attempted to bridge the Indian Ocean to reach the island of Lanka, but Sri Hanumanji, the unalloyed devotee of the personality of Godhead, could cross the ocean simply by jumping over it. The Lord is so merciful upon his pure devotee that he presents his beloved devotee as more powerful than himself. The Lord expressed himself to be unable to save Durvasa Muni, although the Muni was so powerful that he could reach the Lord directly under material conditions. But Durvasa Muni was saved by Maharaj Ambarish, a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, not only is a devotee of the Lord more powerful than the Lord, but also worship of the devotee is considered more effective than direct worship of the Lord. Mad Bhakta Pujabhyadika. The conclusion is, therefore, that a serious devotee must first approach a spiritual master who not only is well-versed in the Vedic literatures, but is also a great devotee with factual realization of the Lord and his different energies. Without the help of such a devotee spiritual master, one cannot make progress in the transcendental science of the Lord. And a bona fide spiritual master like Sukadeva Goswami does not speak about the Lord only in the matter of his internal potencies, but also explains how he associates with his external potencies. The Lord's pastimes in the internal potency are displayed in his activities in Vrindavan, but the workings of his external potency are directed in his features of Karana Vasai Vishnu, Karano Dakshai Vishnu, Garbho Dakshai Vishnu, and Kshiro Dakshai Vishnu. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti offers his good counsel to the interested Vaishnavas when he says that they should not be interested in hearing only about the Lord's activities like the Rasa Leela, but must be keenly interested in his pastimes, in his features of the Purusha Avataras in connection with Shrishti Tattva, creational functions, following the examples of Maharaj Parikshit, the ideal disciple, and Sukadeva Goswami, the ideal spiritual master. And is he back yet?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Very nicely, yes, Prabhu.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I was panicking and you just went ahead and did exactly what needed to be done. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I'll read the translation again. Kindly clear up all these doubtful inquiries, because you are not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and self-realizing transcendence, but are also a great devotee of the Lord and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitanamane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gaura Vanapachani Nirvishesha Shuni Vari Pashtaki Deshatani Om Ajnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So good morning, everyone. Hopefully the internet stays stable. So the first thing I want to point out about today's verse, and I think it's probably obvious to all of us, is this idea, and this is explained to us in Bhagavad Gita 4:34. Tadvidi pranipatena pri prashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanena stappadarshana. So Maharaj Parikshit, he wants to learn about the absolute truth, right? His situation is that he knows he's going to die in 7 days. He doesn't want to waste his life. And so he realizes the importance of approaching a spiritual master, and he realizes the importance of properly inquiring from him in a humble and submissive way, in a mood of servitude, right? So it's also to be noted that the fact that Srila Shukadeva Goswami is vastly learned in the Vedic literatures is a good qualification. But the more important qualification here, mentioned in this verse, is that he is a great devotee, which then, therefore, makes him as good as the Supreme Lord, right? And then when Srila Prabhupada talks about this point in the purport, he actually even mentions that sometimes the pure devotee of the Supreme Lord is actually even better than the Supreme Lord for certain things. So we'll get more to that. But what I want to do is, this purport has so many really great points, and there's a really nice chain of logic that goes through it. So I'm going to highlight some of these points from the purport. So the first point I want to highlight is that since the Supreme Lord is unlimited, it's very difficult to understand him in full, right? So those who are relying on our own sense perception, pratyaksha, and logical inference, anuman, he's absolutely impossible to know, right? He's beyond the scope of the material senses. Now, those who are at least intelligent enough to try to understand him through studying the Vedas, which are specifically presented with the sole purpose of understanding him, it's very difficult to understand him, right? So we go from impossible to understanding him to very difficult to understand. But Krishna, the absolute truth, can be easily understood through his pure devotees, right? So from impossible to difficult to easy, right? We try to do it based on our own senses, our sense perception, and our mundane logic, then it's impossible to know him. If we try to find him through study of the Vedas, which again is specifically designed for us to get to know him, then it's very difficult. But if we go through a pure devotee, then it becomes very easy, right? Because the pure devotees have seen the truth, right? Jnaninas tattva darshana. They have seen the truth, and therefore they can reveal it to you. And this is why it's important for us to appropriately approach a spiritual master in the proper mood. And he should also be a qualified spiritual master, right? One who has seen the truth, right? So that's the first point. And it's also mentioning that even though everything emanates from the Supreme Lord, right, everything comes from him, he not only does he remain complete, but he remains youthful, right? Usually, if you've been around longer than everything else, you're old, right? But everything comes from him. He's, but he's always youthful. So the first point, the Supreme Lord cannot be understood through our senses. And even if we go through the right channels of the Vedas, if we're not doing that under the guidance of a pure devotee, it will be very difficult. But with that guidance of the pure devotee, it becomes very easy. The next point that we just touched on a little bit there is that Sri Krishna is absolute. This means that although everything emanates from him, even after expanding himself in the form of the unlimited spiritual and material worlds, he remains perfect and complete, right? And then the Sri Ishopanishad invocation verse was then quoted to show that. So although everything comes from him, he still remains complete. So that's not how things work in this material world. If you take things away from something, then it's no longer complete, right? But for the absolute truth, he expands himself unlimitedly. So many things come from him, but he still remains complete. The next point in the purport, it ties these 2 points, the first 2 points together. The fact that he's not understandable through our sense perception, and that he, although everything expands from him, he still remains perfect and complete. So these two together is point 3. Because he defies mundane material logic, right? Because materially speaking, you can't take a whole bunch of things from something and it still remain complete. So because he defies mundane material logic, he cannot be understood by such methods. You can't use material logic. He defies those rules, right? But those who redirect their consciousness to the spiritual conception of life awaken their true knowledge, uncontaminated by material nature, and thus willingly engage in his devotional service. Because the idea is when we awaken our true knowledge, not knowledge that's guided at trying to make our material situation better, but knowledge that is in its pure state in trying to understand how everything is part of Krishna, and therefore how everything is to be used in Krishna service in its proper context. Then that's the awakening of true knowledge. So when that true knowledge is awakened, then one naturally follows suit. One naturally acts accordingly, right? We could be making a mistake and we don't know it for a very long time, but as soon as we understand, that was a mistake, and we see the real way to do something, then naturally we'll start doing it the proper way. So therefore, bhakti is both the process and the goal, right? So it's the means and also the end. So in Sri Tattva Sutra, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur presents this in 2 forms. He says there's upaya bhakti, which is what we commonly know as sadhana bhakti, and then there's phala bhakti, which is the fruit, the ripened fruit of bhakti, which is also known as prema bhakti. So sadhana bhakti helps us to redirect our consciousness, and phala bhakti comes once we're fully engaged in pure, unalloyed, unflinching, unflickering, unmotivated, probably get the point here, we can keep going on, devotional service. It can't be tinged with anything. It can't be flickering, sometimes there, sometimes not. It can't have some ulterior motive, like I want to do this for Krishna, but I'm also going to be very happy about the results that I'm going to get because I'm doing this for Krishna. None of that. It has to be completely pure. That's when it becomes prema bhakti. So the means is sadhana bhakti, and the goal is phala bhakti. But bhakti is there. That's the underlying principle. So that's the third point. Since he defies that mundane material logic, he can't be understood by those methods. So we have to redirect our consciousness by engaging in first upaya bhakti, sadhana bhakti, under the guidance of the self-realized souls. And then, therefore, if we engage in that properly, then we attain the pala bhakti, the fruit of bhakti, prema bhakti. The fourth notable point in this purport is that the Lord is so moved by his pure devotee's love for him that the pure devotee becomes more powerful than the Lord himself. Right? This is a heavy statement. The example that Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport is that of Hanuman. Right? And of course, now in this month of Damodar, Kartik, we're reminded of this pastime of baby Damodar being bound by his mother to the wooden grinding mortar. And Krishna explains that he is actually conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion, right? So when his devotee has pure love for him, this actually conquers him. And we get an understanding of how he's conquered, not only in this pastime of Damodar Leela, where he's conquered to the point where his mother is able to bind him with a finite amount of rope, even though he's infinite, right? So everything comes from him, including the rope. And so how could a small amount of rope bind the unlimited, right? So we see that in this pastime. Also, we understand this concept of him being conquered by love. One common one is Krishna's love for the gopis, how he says that he can never repay the debt because they left everything behind and completely dedicated their lives to him, right? And so he can never repay that debt. So he's conquered by that. He sees that they're willing to give up everything just to serve me, right? And one example that I generally give in this context is that of Sudama Brahmana, that of course we all know the story. I'll just give the abridged version. So Sudama Brahmana, he was one of Krishna's schoolmates, and he and his wife in their older age lived a very ascetic lifestyle. They lived in a very simple way, and they're Brahminical, so they were detached, but they lived in a very, very simple way. So their clothes are disheveled, torn, with holes, worn out, threadbare. But they're satisfied. But his wife said, "Hey, Sudama, you're Krishna's friend. You went to school with him, and he's maybe he can help us out. Can you go and see him, right?" And so he didn't want to ask Krishna for a favor, but since his wife told him to go see Krishna, that he wanted to do. He wanted to see Krishna because they had a relationship. So he said, "Okay, I'll go." But you can't just go and see Krishna. Anytime you go to visit someone, you're meant to bring something, right? So, but he didn't have anything. He didn't have anything to give. So he went around the village to the different neighbors, and he begged. And he said, I need to get some charity because I want to give some gift to Krishna. So he got basically a palm full of this like chipped rice, this flat rice, right? Just it's not the highest class food stuff you could imagine, put it that way. And of course he wanted to present it in a nice way, but the only thing he had was like an old cloth. It was clean, so it was nice, it's presentable, but it was old and torn. But anyway, so he bundled it up in this satchel, and he said, "Okay, this is what I'll bring to Krishna." And so he goes, he visits Krishna. Krishna immediately stands up upon seeing him. He's very happy. He offers him a seat. He offers him arati. He offers him a big feast. They reminisce about their time back in Gurukul when they were students together. And he's just received in the best possible way. Then Krishna, he understands, okay, Sudama has this, he's got this gift for me. And so he says, "Oh, I see you hiding that now." Because Sudama, he was actually ashamed because he's just given this huge feast and this, very opulent, elaborate greeting, from a king, with all these facilities. And he's thinking, how could I even possibly give him this? This is not even this isn't even something that's an acceptable offering, so I shouldn't give. But Krishna understood. Hey, what are you trying to hide there? You give that to me. And so he took it, and he took a bite, and he went to take a second, but he was stopped by his wife. Right, no, you've accepted his offering. That's enough. Okay, because otherwise she understood that he would have been even so much more indebted. So when all was said and done, Sudama, he didn't ask for anything. He just went to go home. And Krishna didn't say anything to him, regarding what his desires were, or, what his needs were. So Sudama, he just walked, he started going home. And where his house, his little hut used to be, there was now this grand palace full of courtyards and different buildings, and there were all sorts of servants who were very nicely, properly dressed, opulence, and they're welcoming him. As he realizes it's his home, but it's completely different, right? And so when we read this pastime, it's mentioned that the reason why Krishna didn't tell him, hey, I'm going to give you this palace, and also his wife, then, instead of being emaciated from eating very simply for a long time, she had a very healthy body, with a nice effulgence, and she was dressed in, instead of the torn clothes, she was dressed in very nice clothes with nice jewelry. And so all of these things were drastically changed. And it's pointed out that the reason why Krishna didn't tell Sudama that he was going to give him these things was because he was ashamed that he couldn't give him more. Because the gift that Sudama gave him was more than he actually had, right? He had to go get it from someone else to give to him. But for Krishna, there's no such thing as more than he actually has. So in Krishna's eyes, it was an unfair reciprocation, this flat rice for this paltry, palace with servants and these things like that. Because in Krishna's eyes, no, he gave me something more than what he even had, so I should give him something more than what I have, but that's impossible. I can't do it. So he felt embarrassed, right? So we see that Krishna is conquered and overwhelmed by pure love, right? Our idea of reciprocation is nowhere near Krishna's idea of reciprocation. But that's why he's the Supreme Lord. So he's conquered and overwhelmed by loving devotion. Therefore, since he is so moved by his pure devotee's love for him, the pure devotee becomes sometimes more powerful than Lord himself, where they can bind him with their love or with ropes, or they can perform something in a more powerful way than the Supreme Lord himself. So that's the fifth point that's given in this purport. Pardon. Then the last point we'll talk about is, and this is a very important point. This is where we want to pay very special, close attention. Those who do take proper advantage of the opportunity to serve the spiritual master and receive instructions from him should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit, the ideal disciple, and Shukadev Goswami, the ideal spiritual master, and be eager to hear about Sri Krishna in all of his aspects, including his pastimes of creation in this material manifestation. So it's not that we should say, okay, yes, Krishna, he's the goal. We want to understand him, but we only want to hear the pastimes that appeal to our senses, right? Like when he's maybe conquering different demons, because that appeals to our senses. Because we also, like to be powerful and conquer things that are against us, or we also like to feel protection. So there's something that we can relate. Or the Rasa Lila, because who doesn't want to be the center of a whole lot of enjoyment? No, it's pointed out that the devotees who actually understand Krishna and ourselves, our position, the relationship between us and Krishna, when they inquire from a bona fide spiritual master, they'll be eager to hear about all of these pastimes, right? So in the previous chapter, we were learning that what we spend our time reading or hearing about and what we spend our time talking about, it's a major thing, right? So if we hear and repeat things on the material platform, that will further bind us to the material platform. And if we hear and repeat things that are on the spiritual platform, then that becomes the means of our liberation, right? So that being said, Maharaj Parikshit is very eager to hear about all of these aspects of Krishna, right? So including his pastimes of the creation of this material world, right? So we see that there's a balance. We have to understand all of Krishna's aspects because Krishna reciprocates with his devotees, right? So every time there is an incarnation, the incarnation is there not because Krishna desired, he woke up one day and he thought, you know what, today I want to be a boar. So what could I do as a boar, right? And then, he finds, oh, I can pick Bhumi. No, it doesn't work like that. The way it works is his pure devotee relies on him exclusively. And so therefore, when his pure devotee is put into difficulty, he accepts a form that will specifically serve that purpose, right? So he becomes a boar, which is B-O-A-R, not a boar as in boring, but a pig, wild pig, so that he can pick Bhumi Devi up out of the waters of the Garbhodak ocean, right? And put her back in her position, situate her back in her proper position, right? So all of these incarnations are because of the devotee, right? So Krishna is reciprocating. So not only should we understand that aspect, that Krishna loves his devotees so much that his different expansions are results of his devotees' needs, right, to what is required. We should also understand that we, the rebellious jivas who have misused our free will and have decided to try our hand at being independent or separate from the Supreme Lord and trying to control and enjoy on our own separately from him. For us who have made that decision, the Supreme Lord Krishna, in all of his compassion, expands as this material world, right? Everything that we're dealing with is just an expansion of him. So in a sense, this expansion is for us, we who are here in the material world, right? And it's designed so that not only can we be under the illusion that we can see ourselves as independent from him for the time being, but it also gives us the facilities to remember him in everything we see and everything we do, right? So when we read the Shastras, oftentimes we will hear descriptions. They come up again and again. We'll see descriptions of the universal form, or we'll hear about the different opulences of the Absolute. And we can understand how we can experience or appreciate or understand Krishna in everything that we're dealing with, right? And so this universal form is basically our stepping stone to realize the absolute personality of God, to understand him in his pure, he's always in his pure state, but to understand him through purified senses, right? To get rid of this contamination. So currently we have contaminated senses. So we have this unique mixture currently of a desire to make spiritual advancement and a desire to enjoy materially. It's unfortunate, but that's what position we're in currently. And so what we need to do if we want to actually cultivate that desire to uh, um, to reconnect with our eternal spiritual nature, then it's in our best interest to address these other attachments that we have, right? So when we wake up, what do we spontaneously do? What during our day do we do without even thinking about it? We're just drawn to it. It's because of attraction, we spontaneously do these certain things. So these are our material attachments, the things that keep us in the material world. If we understand how the things that we are attracted to and the reason that we are attracted to them is because of Krishna's potency, and then learn how to properly appreciate that potency instead of in the context of how it serves me, but in the context of how it's meant to be used to serve Krishna, right? And this comes through reading these descriptions of the universal forms and the opulences of the absolute truth. Then the things that we already appreciate, just in a perverted way, because we're appreciating the shadow. When we understand through the descriptions of the universal form that these things that we appreciate, the appreciation is okay, but we're just using them in the wrong way. So when we're able to redirect our consciousness, then everything that is currently holding us down to this material world becomes a tool for our liberation. And there's this verse that I quote often. Oh, let me find it. I just opened the wrong window. It's 1:5:34. It says, "Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work." Right. So, when we aspiring devotees who have both the desire to understand Krishna, but also the desire to live comfortably in this material world, when we start seeing these other things that we're seeing separate, not connected to Krishna, and we see value in them, we should understand that these very things that are causing us bondage right now, perpetual bondage, can actually become tools of our liberation if we actually just see them in the proper way. And so Krishna is so kind to us that he's expanded himself in this way so that we can gradually see him properly and return to that pure spiritual consciousness. So this is why this is pointed out. And so Srila Prabhupada ended his purport giving us Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment. He says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti offers his good counsel of the interested Vaishnavas when he says that they should not be interested in hearing only about the Lord's activities like Rasa Lila, but must be keenly interested in the pastimes and his features of the Purusha avatars in connection with the Shrishti Tattva creational functions, following the examples of Maharaj Parikshit, the ideal disciple, and Shukadev Goswami, the ideal spiritual master. So oftentimes we want to skip these descriptions of the Purusha avatars and the material creation because we feel that, no, we already know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so why don't we just, hear about those pastimes, right? But we see here that Maharaj Parikshit, who is highly advanced and elevated, like Krishna personally saved his life, while he was in the womb, right? So he's had personal darshan of Krishna. And when he found out he was going to die, he didn't protest. He just went and found someone that he could hear absolute truth from, right? So he's the ideal disciple. If he, who is so advanced, wants to hear about these, Krishna's pastimes in his creational functions, then who are we to say that we don't need to hear these things, right? So it means we have to hear both. It doesn't mean that we should avoid hearing about Rasa Lila, but hearing about these things, especially first, before we become distracted by these things, because oftentimes we see spiritual activities in a mundane way, if that's what our consciousness is. So first we purify our consciousness, And then we can actually understand these other pastimes, the personal pastimes of Sri Krishna, right? And not only can we understand them, through the mercy of the pure devotee, we can also eventually join in those pastimes, right? And that's what our goal is. So if that's our goal, this is the way to do it. So just in summary, there were 6 points that I wanted to bring out. They were that Srila Prabhupada brought out. They are that the Supreme Lord is unlimited, so he's very difficult to understand. If you're trying to understand him with sense perception and logic, it's impossible. If you try to understand him through independent study of the Vedas, it's very difficult. But if you study the Vedas under the guidance of a pure devotee, then it's very easy, right? Then the second point was that Sri Krishna is absolute. Although everything comes from him, he still remains complete and perfect, right? Then the third point was that because he defies this mundane material logic, he can't be understood by those methods. But those who redirect our consciousness from thinking in terms of material to thinking in terms of spirituality through the guidance of the spiritual master can then attain the goal, which is prema bhakti, through the means of sadhana bhakti, right? The fourth point was that the Lord is so moved by his pure devotees' love for him that sometimes they become more powerful than him, right? And we gave a few examples of that. The fifth point was that the devotee spiritual master can easily give a qualified disciple knowledge of Sri Krishna. Without the help of such a spiritual master, one cannot make progress in the transcendental science of the Lord. And the last was that if you do want to take proper advantage of this opportunity, the guru-disciple relationship, you should be eager to hear all of Krishna's activities, not just his personal pastimes, but even his pastimes involving the creation of this material world and his different incarnations, the different ways he interacts with his different devotees. So we will stop here and see if there are any questions or comments on today's verse. Maybe there are no questions or comments, okay? If not, then I thank you all for coming. I apologize for the technical difficulties. The data here in Mayapur is sometimes it fluctuates. Let's see if I can get video on for a moment. Yeah, but yeah. So hopefully it didn't cut out. Sorry for the rough start.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you very much for your
Hare
class.
Krishna.
Yeah, very nicely and all in points. It was really nice. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Nice.
Thank you. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vanchakalpa Trivishar Kripa Sindhu Vyacha Pritanam Pavane Vyo Vaishnavi Vyo.
Okay.
Thank you, Church and Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.